afternoon and welcome to Beyond the Forecast. We start with a live look at downtown Buffalo, and we can't see the sky, but trust me when I say it's still kind of cloudy out there, still even a little bit muggy, but we are tracking some improvements for today. Things are drying out, not just with respect to that humidity, but with respect to those showers that you were tracking earlier today.
Oh yeah, and this morning definitely was not a comfortable one. You said even last night as you were leaving,
Last night was kind of disgusting. I'm one who actually likes a humid summer night. I know I'm kind of alone on that, but I think it's comfortable. It feels like a warm hug. But I stepped outside last night after doing the 11 p.m. show, and it was too much for me. So I can't even imagine what it must have been like for people who don't like the humidity.
Yeah, even this morning I walked outside, knew it was gonna be a little humid, but I was like, oh, I can't deal with this. And even sitting on the roof this morning and for Patrick was absolutely horrible.
Yeah, no, that humidity really gets to you. Thankfully, though, we didn't have super high temperatures corresponding with that humidity. Yeah. It was more the second half of the day and the overnight, because I know across the South, they had those extreme heat warnings and heat advisories because those places had temperatures in the 90s and heat index values in the triple digits.
Thankfully, we are not dealing with that. It definitely is tropical feeling this morning, and we'll talk a little bit more of something else tropical in just a bit. But here's what we have going on with those temperatures. About 76 in Buffalo, 73 in Batavia, and we have decreased a little bit when it comes to those dew point temperatures. Now, throughout the rest of the day, we'll continue to see some improvement, but taking a look as we head towards Jamestown, dew point still at 72, over into Wellsville also as well. So it definitely not feeling too great. When it does come over to radar, we are tracking definitely some isolated shower chances. But when it comes to seeing those clouds, it's not looking like, or it is looking like we are going to clear that out a little bit as well. But when it comes to those rainfall totals, it didn't seem like we got too much, especially into our northern areas. And we picked a little bit up from this morning when it did come to, we saw one of those steadier thunderstorms work its way through, picking up a bit more of that rainfall. Now, speaking of tropical and picking up some good amount of rainfall, we got quite a bit when it comes to Lala over in Hawaii. Now, these are very impressive, and these are in inches. Over 3 feet has come its way down, and some of those videos that we saw looking insane. Now, when you get this much rainfall, you're dealing with a lot of runoff, mudslides. I saw that over 100 homes of damage. We're talking about power outages for quite some time. Yeah, just devastating. And believe it or not, this did not even hit landfall. And they've only had 2 hurricanes in recorded history hit Hawaii landfall, but this is quite devastating, and now it has worked its way off. Right now back at a tropical storm, but it does look like it is going to intensify as it shifts its way out, and we'll call this a fish storm at this point because it isn't going to be hitting much more land. Now, when it does come to the track of it now, like I said, it's just going to be the fish dealing with this at the moment. It will re-intensify back to a Category 1 hurricane. And Hawaii itself is kind of special. Now, a lot of those hurricanes develop a little bit more southeast of Hawaii, very far away usually from the islands, but there really aren't favorable conditions to really see hurricanes hit Hawaii. The water is a little bit too cold, and one of those big ingredients you need for hurricanes is wind shear, and you need it to be pretty low. You don't want wind shear that's kind of the change in directions as you move up vertically in the atmosphere. And when you get too much of that wind shear, it just takes those hurricanes and doesn't allow for a lot of that development. So that's usually why we don't get those into Hawaii, but this is one of those special occasions, and hopefully in the next few days here we are going to be seeing some improvements, but it is going to take quite some time to see big repairs happen on the Big Island. And it does come to the Atlantic Ocean, we are far behind, and we've only had 3 named tropical storms, I believe, right, Lauren?
Yes.
Yep. So we are still far behind what we have been seeing. In 2020, one was telling me earlier, 30 hurricanes that were named. So we even had to go past those names that we ran out of them. So this year, very quiet. It is an El Nino year, so very low, or I'd say a bit more wind shear is what we're dealing with. So these are a little bit harder to see some of these storms take off into the Atlantic Ocean. And the prediction we've had so far, or what NOAA was predicting, is about 8 to 14 storms. When we had 3. We still have some time to see this development, but we've got nothing when it comes to hurricanes or even major hurricanes. But believe it or not, we're not even kind of into the thick of our hurricane season. We've got quite a bit of time as we're working our way into the rest of the year. We still don't usually see that peak until we hit into September, October. It's kind of when we get the warmest temperatures in the ocean at that time. So we got quite a ways to go when it does come to our hurricane season. But usually in El Nino years, it does get a little bit quieter when it comes to our Atlantic hurricane season. But believe it or not, it does get a little bit busier when it comes to the Pacific. And Pacific itself dealing with these hurricanes, the names and where they go, it's definitely a little bit trickier to pinpoint than it is into the Atlantic. But back to our region and what we're dealing with for today. We have those spotty showers, and these are mainly just light showers, maybe a few raindrops. But a lot of that activity is going to continue to push its way out. We're going to see high pressure build back in for a bit tomorrow, and drier conditions are going to work its way in. That is some pretty good news. And if you're not a fan of that wet weather, well, good news for you is that a lot of this week is going to have quite a bit of dry time. Well, we do have a few shower chances we'll keep a lookout for, but for today, becoming mainly dry. A lot of the activity we saw this morning, not going to be seeing that the rest of the day. Now for tomorrow, it is going to be on the drier side, more sunshine, and that oppressive heat that humidity we were dealing with this morning. Yeah, we're not going to be waking up with that tomorrow, and then we'll be tracking a few shower chances, I'd say Wednesday, but beyond that, it is going to be dry, great weather to be heading outdoors. Into future look, notice that the rest of the day, clouds continue to clear. It is going to be feeling much more comfortable going into the overnight hours tonight while we wake up tomorrow morning. Our lows even going to be feeling a bit more comfortable into the 60s. We've got that drier air allowing for temperatures to cool a bit more. We have the possibility for some fog developments tomorrow morning as well, especially into the southern tier. So that should burn off quickly throughout the morning. Plenty of sunshine back into the mix. Overall, a decently warm day, and then we'll be tracking a front that'll be pushing in, and we'll see some showers along with it. At the moment, it looks like a lot of that will be coming late into the night on Tuesday, through the morning into your Wednesday, and then drier into the afternoon. And it looks by the evening, better conditions for your Wednesday. Not much you can complain about. On top of that, when it comes to humidity, I know this is where I've been complaining about it for the past 10 minutes. We will see some improvements as we head to tonight, and especially tomorrow morning. That's one thing that's contributing to those cooler temperatures, spiking back up a little bit more for your Wednesday when we see that front come through, tracking more showers. But the end of the week, conditions are looking absolutely beautiful. A bit more sunshine into the mix, drier conditions. We really won't be keeping an eye out until we head into the weekend and tracking that maybe into next week. Lots of time to see changes there. So for tonight, mainly clear. Patchy fog developments will develop into the southern tier and a bit more comfortable when it comes to those lows. Tomorrow, mostly sunny, less humid, and it is going to be pretty dry for us. We'll see that rain return later into our Tuesday, and then into your Wednesday morning, we'll be tracking those showers, but I am not going to complain. And the best part about it, I'd say, we've got a lot of sunshine into the mix through the end of the week. And if you're heading out to the Erie County Fair, I know lots of events this week, we couldn't have had a better stretch of weather, I'd say, over the past, what is it on? Day 7 at the moment, but it definitely is going to be a bit more comfortable through the rest of the week. Yeah, I can't complain too much. We want to head outside.
I know, yeah, this week actually looks kind of similar to how last week was. We had those spotty shower chances on Wednesday, and then the Thursday, Friday, Saturday were really gorgeous days with another shower chance on Sunday. So, I mean, not too much to complain about.
I know, and the drier conditions, I know you like the humidity, but I'm telling you, my hair can't take it anymore. It's going up this morning and coming back down. I wish I had curly hair at this point. It's bald last week, curly hair this week.
Oh, I mean, you still look great. You've been on air for so many hours now. We are going to throw it to break. When we come back, I am going to talk about some climatology.
Welcome back to Beyond the Forecast. And Lauren, my favorite part of the show, you got some science for us to explain.
I do have some science. It's kind of all over the place. So I've been thinking a lot. So my best friend lives in England. So sometimes I think about England and I try to visit her, and climatologically, it's not that different there in the summer compared to how it is here, even though geographically they are so different. And I always kind of find it so fascinating how areas of Europe, geographically, you would expect them to maybe be a little bit colder or to climatologically just be different from how they are. So I'm going to kind of try to explain why that is. But first, I have to get into a lot of science before I can even get to more of the geography of it. So I'm starting with Earth, very vaguely. The shape of Earth is a spheroid, but for all intents and purposes, we basically just consider it a sphere because it is slightly wider equatorially versus vertically, but let's just consider it a sphere. So if you take into account around the equator, the circumference of the circle that would be around the equator compared to something a little bit farther up with respect to latitude, obviously the circumference all the way around the equator is going to be a much greater distance compared to somewhere much higher up on the Earth. If you think, the pole, you take 10 steps away from the North Pole, that circumference is very, very tiny. And we know obviously the Earth rotates about once every day. It's technically not exactly once, but pretty much so. For the equator, it actually has to move that area a lot faster than areas that are further north or south in latitude, even though when we're looking at it, it looks like everything is moving at the same speed, but the equator has to move a greater distance over those 24 hours. So because of that, we tend to get something called the Coriolis effect. Now imagine these are two train tracks, and they are going at different speeds. The blue is going faster, the red is going slower. The blue is our equator stand-in, the red is anything farther north than it, just for example purposes. So you're on the blue train track and you want to throw a ball straight to that X. But because the tracks are moving at different speeds, it actually is going to look like that ball curves a bit and it's going to end up much farther because of that inertia associated with how fast you are moving along that blue line compared to how quickly the red line is moving. So it's not going to go straight. It's not going to go to your target. It is going to look like it has curved. And that is what we kind of think of as the Coriolis effect. That's what kind of creates a lot of the spin that we see in systems that I'll briefly touch on in a moment. But it also is responsible for the direction of our winds, our prevailing winds. Obviously, we talk about our local winds. We get winds that are very specific to our area because of the Great Lakes. I was talking about that northwesterly wind earlier that is giving us that lower humidity, but we have those greater, more prevailing winds. So closer to the equator, you have the easterlies or the trade winds, and then a little bit farther in the mid-latitudes, which is where we are, we have the westerlies. That's why a lot of our weather systems move from west to east. So if we're trying to see what our weather is going to be like, we tend to look out west for that. That's because the prevailing wind direction is to the west. That's also why low pressure systems for us here in the northern hemisphere move in a counterclockwise direction while high pressure moves in a clockwise direction. And though I didn't highlight it, actually I'm going to quickly go back to that. You do notice those wind directions are kind of opposite across the southern hemisphere, and because of that, their low pressure systems actually move clockwise and high pressure moves counterclockwise. So if a meteorologist from the northern hemisphere were ever to move to the southern hemisphere, if I tried to do weather in Australia, I would get very confused very quickly because the maps would not look correct to me. Now, what this also does, it creates these kind of water currents called gyres, and we have them across all of our main oceans. And what that is basically so the water at the equator gets warmed most effectively, and it brings that warmer water to other parts of the ocean, eventually cooling down to return to the equator to warm up again. So you get that kind of cycle. So this is the Indian Ocean gyre. There's a North Pacific, a very big one. The Pacific is our biggest ocean. You have the South Pacific, also the musical that my grandparents went to on their first date, I believe. Family history. The South Atlantic and the North Atlantic, which is the one that impacts us and Europe the most because this is our main ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. And one of the big features within the North Atlantic gyre is the Gulf Stream. If you've heard anyone ever talking about weather as it pertains to water currents, you've probably heard the Gulf Stream mentioned more than anything because that is what mainly impacts our area. It's what helps to drive some of the direction of our hurricanes even, because typically in the hurricane season in the Atlantic, it's those waves coming off of Africa. They first move east because of those trade winds, but then as they start to move north, it's those westerlies, and they tend to follow the Gulf Stream. Sometimes if a storm does hold its strength, it can head toward Europe and even England at times, usually not maintaining its tropical characteristics, but that is the path that it holds. Now, the Gulf Stream is very important because it is bringing considerably warmer ocean water farther north than you would expect it to be. It's not, blazing hot water that we do tend to see in the Gulf and farther south, but the warm water is considerably more north at higher latitudes, off to our east in Europe because of that. So just to kind of give you a vague idea, so I have a line of latitude. This is around 43 degrees north. That is where Buffalo is. And then this next one is around 52 degrees north. That is where London is in England. And you can kind of see that temperature variance. So for us here in Buffalo, we actually correspond with the north of Spain, south of France, technically speaking, with respect to how far we are from the equator, whereas England corresponds with some pretty northerly parts of Canada, north of Nova Scotia. You would expect them to be a lot colder, but because of that Gulf Stream bringing that comparatively warmer water to their area, it moderates their temperatures a lot more. There are also some geographic factors with Europe when it comes to other parts of it with respect to their mountain ranges and how the Alps are oriented. But I always find it very fascinating with respect to that, how it deals with those temperatures, though you should take some of the temperature contour with a grain of salt because of that time difference as well. So it's not always easy to get a great approximation. So that's why I'm also going to show kind of the climatology of the areas. So this is a kind of weather tool that we use with respect to all the different climatologies that exist across the earth. And there are many. I did create kind of a simplified version of it, just simplifying the colors a little bit. Red will correspond to more tropical climates, the orange dry, yellow temperate, green continental, and blue is polar. And you notice a lot of Europe is in that yellow, which for us actually corresponds to our southern states, whereas our area and parts of Canada are in that green continental. Basically, the difference between the temperate and the continental, they tend to be pretty similar, but with the continental, you have to have at least 1 month where the average temperature is below freezing. So you can notice how there is a bit of a difference with respect to that, and all of that has to do with, not all of it has to do, but a lot of it does have to do with the Gulf Stream and the way they have much more mild winters compared to us, because we tend to be getting that colder air from the north, the polar air from Canada and from the North Pole, and it stays in our area more because of how our mountains are arranged compared to how they are in Europe. So that's kind of how they are classified climatologically. If you want to get more into the biomes within Earth, there tend to be 5: aquatic, grasslands, forest, desert, and tundra. Now, I'm just introducing these because sometimes it's not always easy to think of topics for the weather show, but I thought it might be fun to, for the next couple of weeks, pick one of those biomes and then just do like a deep dive into the climatology of that and how those break down into different things. Just for example, one of the more simple ones is aquatic. You have, like saltwater and freshwater and how that's all different. But that's all for now.
We can't wait.
We'll toss you to break. Welcome welcome back to Beyond the Forecast. So I know Sarah went into a deep dive a bit about hurricane season and how it's been very different in the Pacific compared to the Atlantic. This year has been really quiet for us.
Which is a good news, though. I think
very good news.
We did need a little bit of a break, but still, there's plenty of time to see some development.
There is still plenty of time. We still haven't reached peak hurricane season, and the back half of hurricane season does tend to be more active than that front half, so it's not an even perfect bell curve, even though in general it does look like a bell curve. Now, obviously, we're glad about there not being a ton of hurricane activity, though that is causing a bit of an issue in Puerto Rico, because even though hurricanes can be so devastating, they get a lot of their rainfall from tropical systems, and they're just not getting that. So that is causing its own kind of devastation, which is tough with respect to weather. But we are talking about this quiet Atlantic season. What was not a quiet Atlantic season was 2020.
Oof, yeah. Couldn't ask for a worse year.
Yeah, no, that was really rough. I know Sarah talked about that briefly. We had the record for most named tropical systems at 30. There were 14 hurricanes, which is only dwarfed by 2005, where they had 15 hurricanes, but then they were tied for the number of major hurricanes. So what happened, because we had so many named storms, there were actually more than I believe the lists tend to have. That is 21. The lists tend to have 21 names. We do have 26 letters in the alphabet, but there are some letters that just don't have as many names, so we do skip those letters.
Like X and Z.
Exactly. But so what the plan would be, usually, is that we would then go to the Greek alphabet, starting with alpha, beta, gamma. But what happened is that we ended up having such strong storms there as well. Some of those Greek letters were then retired, and then it would get very confusing if we ever had to do that again. So what the National Hurricane Center decided to do was create a supplemental name list. This is what it is right here. I don't think we'll need to use this year, but in the case that there are 22 or more named storms in a hurricane season, this is what we'll pull from, and it will remain this same list. So if a name, let's say Braylon, has to get retired, they'll just replace the B name, while the rest of the list will remain intact in perpetuity. So just a little bit of kind of recent hurricane history for you. But that is all we have for you today on Beyond the Forecast. We will be back on Friday with more weather fun.